Well, good evening, good evening, good evening, and good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to WeatherBrains episode 977. And this is going to be for the 7th of October, 2024. I'm late. I'm late. So let me get everybody online here. Very tardy. Very odd audio routing problem. I rarely ever have audio routing problems, but we had a little audio routing problem. So the pre-show is slightly tardy. So to all of our regulars, our guests, it's my fault. I'm raising my hand. I did it. It's me.
You're allowed, James fan.
Well, it's like, again, I was telling those guys last night, I use this program called Audio Hijack, which is the way we route, the audio so
Oh
you
no,
guys can hear like
don't tell me you
the fog
downloaded the
monitor.
update.
No, I didn't. I had no update. Very bizarre situation. But I just kind of re-kicked everything. The deal is you turn it off and on again. In fact, hang on. Let's see. Let's see if you guys can hear this song, then it's working.
Have you tried turning it off and on again? Off and on again. Off and on again. Have you tried turning it off and on again? That normally does the trick.
There you go.
Excellent.
So we're good here. Goodness gracious.
I don't even know what to
James. Hey
say.
James. Hey James.
Yes.
Can Mike hear us okay? Hey Mike, I
Yay.
want you
You
to
got a thumbs up.
meet somebody. One of my business partners. We're opening a hotel here in Georgia. This is Mary Camp. She's a huge fan.
Oh,
And
Mary.
she couldn't wait to say hello to you.
Hello.
Hi, Mary. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Doing great,
Weather
hanging out
excited?
here at the beach, waiting for a Cat 5.
Great.
Well, thank you,
Where,
Mary.
where are you
Well,
opening your hotel?
in Cornelia, Georgia, Mike, northeast of
Yes.
Atlanta,
Up
in the
85.
foothills of the Blue Ridge.
Yes.
We don't want to see you in these parts ever, Mike. You just stay away unless
What
you're
about if
coming
I
for
what
vacation.
about if I'm a paying customer on a sunny
That
weekend?
now that's a different story. You come to look at the leaves, and
Well,
we'll
you
host you every fall.
know, going to be seeing them on the Blue Ridge Parkway this year, of course.
Yeah. Well, I wanted Mary to say hello because she's a big
And
fan.
and hello to Mr. Stan, a longtime viewer, first time caller.
Mike, this could be the low point of your whole career right here. I mean, out of all the things you've done, this could
No,
be the
no, no,
very
no.
bottom.
No, that
So
was working with Jen Nairmore at the Weather Channel.
Excellent. Hi, Mike. It's so
That
good to
was
see you.
Okay, good to see you. That was too. I'm sorry. I think we saw that one coming right up.
Oh,
High
absolutely.
time.
I was wondering.
Well, I'm glad I can be on finally because I don't know if my previous employer would allow, they wouldn't even let me do like radio interviews or anything. So
wow.
I did a podcast with, what's her name over in Charleston. That was fun. Emily Gracie. And, so that was my first podcast ever. And I'm 68 years old. But, but anyway.
Hey, 68 is the new 38. I'm in there with you.
That's
The big
right.
68.
Yeah.
I feel better now than I felt when I was 30, and I'm 68 years old.
Are we live yet, or how does this? Uh,
So we
You're live
so
on
here's the
YouTube.
situation. We just hit television. Let me welcome our television viewers. We're at the top of the hour. It's Monday night. We have no weather issues locally here. So for those watching on the television side, we are glad that you are here. And Mike, we are streaming on YouTube and we are live on local television. And most people listen to the audio version of this, but a lot of people watch. And so we're about to start the recorders. So that we call this the pre-show, and I didn't have time to say it. This is the magical part of the program where we typically do three things. We share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and from time to time we say outrageous things. So there
And
you
now we
go.
say we get to say hello to celebrities, James.
Hey, Ethan, can you hear us okay?
I can. Good to be on.
Hi, Ethan. Thanks for
Good.
joining us.
Yeah, so excited you joined us, Ethan.
Yeah, this is awesome.
I never thought
Ethan
I'd be
hasn't
on
slept in 20 days. It's,
Yeah.
Yeah.
at some point we'll all get some sleep, but it ain't happening right now. So let's get the recorders going here. So, all right. I'm just glad the audio routing issue corrected itself. All right. Here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You're listening to WeatherBrains. They're kind of a big deal.
Have a big deal. In words of Bill Curtis. Hey, this is WeatherBrains, episode number 977. This is for the 7th of October, 2024. And all of a sudden, the hurricane season is alive. And man, do we have a lot to talk about here tonight. We've had Helene and we have Milton now as we speak. And so we have a very established, astute range of guests here. But let's bring in our regulars. Dr. Jacobs, your thoughts on both of these big storms?
How's my audio? Is it good?
Loud and clear. Sounds great.
Awesome. I'm dialing in from my mom's house, so you know what that means.
She's playing. What does she play? Minecraft.
Minecraft.
Yeah.
Probably Halo.
I told her to lay off the Doom 3 while I'm doing this.
That's our first show title of the night. Lay off the Doom 3.
It's wow. I mean, it's a lot of action. I mean, even today, the swell from Kirk along the Carolinas was impressive, and that's on the other side of Bermuda. Helene was, I think that Helene was probably one of the best forecast track storms by the models I've ever seen. I mean, they pegged the landfall site before this thing even formed a depression, and the Hurricane Center went out there and started issuing tracks and guidance and warnings way before they normally would, because they had such confidence in that. But I think people underestimated what would happen with a lot of that when that tropical moisture hits the upslope and just gets wrung out across the mountains. I mean, I've got friends and family in Asheville, and it's devastated. Like they lost their houses. I've never seen anything like it. I was planning to go camping in Brevard, and that's not going to happen for probably a couple of years now.
No.
Yeah, and so this, I mean, did you see that plane?
So what are your thoughts, Neil, on Milton? What do you just tell it? Just get it right up front here. Give us your thoughts.
They just did a drops on with 899 surface pressure. I mean, that's tied for 5th in the Atlantic Basin now, which is
Dr.
wild.
Jacobs, I was in my dorm at Sanford University with a weather radio under my pillow the night Hurricane Allen hit 899, and so it brought back some memories to 1980.
After the Hurricane Center at 8:00 as 897.
Yeah.
Their 8:00 Eastern advisory, so that's down 2 more.
Right.
Yeah, I think that next drops on missed the center substantially, and it was still in the 903, 904 range.
It's gonna, I mean, it's in perfect conditions for probably the next 12 hours. I mean, it's probably going to fluctuate with some eyewall replacement cycles, but I don't know what the Yucatan
mile diameter eye.
Yeah, it almost looked like on water vapor imagery. It almost looked like the eye was going away, but it was just that tight, that it was hard for unless you got into like 1 kilometer resolution imagery, it was hard to see. It was so tight, but I mean, I think the models have been on to this swing to the north, and it sort of runs into that ridge, heads north, and then eventually runs into that jet, and that's going to pull it back east, and hopefully that jet injects some shear and taps some of the energy, bleeds it off. But the thing is, it's like if it gets this strong of a 5, it's like people say, oh, it'll drop a category or 2 with the shear, and I'm like, well, going from a 3 to a 1 is not the same as going from a really high 5 to like a 3 or a 4, and if it's got to slow down enough to give it time for the shear to sort of bleed off some energy and get some dry air in the southern side, otherwise it's going to be bad, and I think people, I was talking to some folks earlier today about like, good side versus bad side. And I was like, let's move away from this talk about the good side of the storm, because there's a bad side and there's a worse side. And I think people are going to
Neil, what do you tell people in Tampa Bay, St. Pete? What do you tell them?
leave. I mean, if you know, get out while you can. It's, you know, there's enough wiggle and wobble room in the track position that it's not worth assuming you might get lucky and not be on the onshore side of the eye where the surge hits. You know, if this thing coming in at that angle and then making that turn, if it's a little bit more north, it pushes all that water into Tampa Bay. And if it's a little bit south, I mean, at that point, it's what's the point? Like, you're going to lose power. Like, it's going to be miserable. Just go somewhere else. I've never understood. Like, I grew up in Miami and then I moved to Charleston right before Hugo hit, and we didn't leave, and it was stupid. Like, I had no power in Charleston for a month. We had two trees go right through the house. It's not worth it. Just go away. I mean, if you live in the St. Pete, Tampa Bay area, you know, in all likelihood, most of your stuff on your first floor is probably messed up from last week. So, you know, I hate to say how awful it is to get hit twice in a row, but I'd rather get hit twice in a row back to back than to rebuild my house and have it taken out again the next year. So I just, you know, my uncle just texted me and he's like, you know, what should I tell my friends here? I was like, tell them to leave. And don't just, if you think, oh, I'll just go like 5 miles inland or 20 miles north, you know, just keep going, because, you know, this is going to move inland, and there's going to be pretty high wind damage pretty far in, because it's going to be moving relatively quick compared to other storms. And I think people are underestimating like trees and stuff.
And I promise we're going to get to everybody here in just a second, but I want to ask you about Orlando, because so many people, Neil, are asking about, I'm in Orlando. What do I do?
It's kind of a hard call. Like, if you don't have a reason to be there, but I think you're probably okay. You might lose power. That the grid in Orlando is a lot beefier than some other areas. And it really sort of depends on your housing too. Like, there's a lot of people in Orlando live in, you know, pretty solid houses. You know, I don't think they're not going to get any like surge there, but they're certainly likely to lose power. They're probably going to be wind damage. But definitely if you're along the coastline, you know, obviously if you're in a warning area where they're telling you to get out, follow instructions. But, you know, there's probably a lot of people from the coastal area that are going to Orlando. I mean, it's certainly safer in Orlando than, you know, Tampa or Sarasota or some place like that.
Right. Well, let's go to the lady with no tonsils. Kim, first off, how are you?
Introduction. It's so nice to see you all too, guys. I'm doing a lot better. I actually have a voice this week, so that central feature allows me to be with you. It's very good to be back. It was very hard not to be here when you guys were starting to digest what was going on with Helene, but it is just so striking. I remember as of last Monday night, still how little we knew. And we were wrestling with those questions of why did we not know? And that deep-seated feeling of this is a generational catastrophe that has taken place. And part of the reason we don't know is that there's not a lot left. And it turns out that in the week since then, that has really borne out to be true. So I'm really hurting for just everybody who's been affected by Helene, both in Florida and up into the Appalachian Mountains along the Blue Ridge, and adding another disaster on top of this, especially for the same general region of Florida that was just hit. The misery level right now is so profound. So I'm grateful to be able to be here tonight for our conversation. I think there's a lot that we're unpacking as a field, especially about Helene. But I think Milton presents its own set of really interesting concerns and challenges. And I'm glad to be able to be here to digest it with you all. And then Mike and Ethan, really great to have you here. Really excited to have this discussion with you.
Yeah, I think this is going to be an important show because we got so much to talk about. But Kim, we're so glad you're here because we have so many questions for you about this whole process. Let's see. Rick Smith is back. Rick's been on a tour of what? Aruba, Jamaica,
Florida, actually, but the other side of Florida. This was my closest encounter with a hurricane ever. I was in St. Augustine when Helene made landfall. And according to radar scope, I was about 155 miles east of the center. So that was plenty close enough for me. We had multiple hours of sustained tropical force, storm force winds, minor damage around the condos where we were staying. But yeah, and then driving back from Jacksonville, at least 130 miles to the west along I-10, just almost a continuous swath of tree damage. Just, you just saw it all along. So I didn't experience anything near the center of it, but it was interesting to be that close and be a customer of weather information and trying to find out county specific information. Maybe we can get into some of that later, but and now just sick looking at Milton just intensifying rapidly in the Gulf. My daughter actually lives in the Orlando area, so she's been texting me today and trying to get her stuff in order. So yeah, it's just it's a rough time for everybody, meteorologists, and like Kim said, it's good to kind of get together and talk about some of this stuff.
Rick, driving down Interstate 10, did you think for just a minute, how do you survey this? Because you're used to doing tornado surveys.
I thought about that. My wife is probably sick of hearing me make comments about it. But yeah, I wondered, I mean, how in the world do you ever get your arms around something like this? It's just amazing. And I have always had the utmost respect, but every event I have more respect for the Weather Service, the media, anybody that works in a coastal office that has to do tropical operations. I don't think I could do it. I don't, the long drawn out period of watching this horrible thing come towards you and just the anticipation and the surveys, I tip my hat to all of those people. It's just amazing. And I've talked to people in some Weather Service offices that are really struggling. This is their first big event, and with the loss of life and everything. So things that we'll probably touch on through the evening.
Yeah, sometimes I think, goodness, I'm fatigued here, but it is nothing like working for some of these Weather Service offices, what they have been through and what they will go through leading up to, during, and after the event. It's just incredible. But let's briefly change the subject, go to our Arctic Circle correspondent, Jen Naramore. We just want to thank you for sending down this air mass. Thank you, and thank you. We're going to see some 40s, I think, down here by the end of the week.
Yeah, it's been nice and cool, and I've missed you guys last week. I actually still had family in town. My beautiful niece got married, and so we had actually impacts from Helene up in Ohio because we had the remnants that just kind of just spin for a while, and it was going to be a beautiful wedding day. It was going to be clear, and then we had Helene come in, but it rained all day. Not one person complained. It did not even remotely matter. She had the best luck of all days, and it was just a great day. But it was hard because I was joyful and distracted at the same time. I don't do a lot of radio stations in that area, but I do Murphy, North Carolina, and then Silva, North Carolina ended up underwater as well. And so I was concerned about them. And now jumping into the Milton coverage has been a lot more, could even feel it today as I was going, just as you're watching things unfold throughout the whole day. It was just been overwhelming to see. And then I could see myself getting emotional. And then, when that happens, we have to take a step back because we can get so caught up in everything. And I do have my best friend who's down in that area and was helping guide other people. And so you're personally invested and you're professionally invested. And so it is quite a bit, but I'm glad to be here. I'm ready just to kind of unpack what's happening with Milton. And I'm just, it's amazing to see what's happening and just, and then review too with our great guests, what happened with Helene.
All right. Well, Bill Murray, let's bring him in. Let's go. Important show tonight. Let's bring our guests.
Yeah, James, tonight's first guest weather brain was made possible by our friend Charles Peak. We want to thank him. And our guest weather brain is a veteran meteorologist, storm specialist, with Fox Weather. He joined Fox in August. What of which year, Mike? Last year, 2023?
No, just 2 months ago.
Oh, just 2 months ago in 2024,
Yep.
after 30 years at the
Thir-
Weather Channel.
32 plus, yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, over 30 years where he became well known for his extensive live coverage of major weather events, hurricanes, tornado outbreaks, nor'easters. He's reported on over 25,000 live events, often from the front lines of severe weather across the U.S. BS in math from Salisbury State, master's in meteorology from Penn State. He's covered weather from various high profile sporting events, also like the Indianapolis 500 and various NFL games. Mike Seidel, you're one of my idols and a legend in our industry, and I'm so looking forward to this conversation tonight. And we sort of paired you with an up and coming young meteorologist who's gained a lot of fame lately. And I'll toss it over to my friend Jen Nairmore to introduce him.
Yeah, I was monitoring Twitter and we got a tweet from Chuck Copeland who said, consider getting this guy on. I'm like, okay. So I threw it out there and Bill's like, go get him. And so I did. And we have Ethan Clark, who's a 21-year-old meteorologist and owner of North Carolina's Weather Authority, a popular online weather page. She began in the 7th grade, a student in North Carolina State University. Ethan, you major in environmental science with a concentration in meteorology and natural disasters. You've gained a substantial following for your detailed hyperlocal forecasts, especially during hurricanes and severe weather, and known for your accessible communication style. You've always just become a really trusted source for North Carolina's, emphasizing fact-based and straightforward forecasts. So, Ethan, we're glad to have you here. Thank you for joining us, and we're going to be really interested to hear everything that you did building up to Helene. But we want to just go ahead and start with the question we always ask. Did you come out of the womb wanting to be a meteorologist, or at what point? What sparked your interest?
Well, I've been watching Mike and James for a long time, so I'm very honored to get to be on a talk with them. But I pretty much always loved weather since I was a very young kid. I was the uh, TV broadcast or morning news in elementary school weather forecaster. Had to get approval because only fifth graders were allowed to be it, but I started in third grade. So I've always loved weather. Just always loved North Carolina. I actually did attend Penn State for a semester, so I can say I was a Nittany Lion for a little bit, but I decided to come back to North Carolina just because I just couldn't leave North Carolina, I guess. No hard feelings against Penn State. I enjoyed it, but just fun to be back home. So I'm excited to
And
talk about everything and obviously keep the emphasis on Milton and Helene. So,
well, thank you for being with us tonight, Ethan. And Mike, you've been in the field for a lot longer than Ethan, over 3 decades. Can you share with us? I've been waiting to ask you this question for 19 years, Mike. What drew you into this career? And talk about your first experiences in weather.
I just became interested in snowstorms when I was growing up on the Maryland, Delaware coast and started measuring snow way back in the early 60s when I was in sixth grade, sixth grade when I was 6 years old, and my parents would pull me out of the storm in my pajamas. In fact, I still have the same ruler, same wooden ruler I used to measure snow almost, wow, over 60 years ago, 65 years ago. And then it just became kind of a hobby. And then I got into radio when I was 16, and then I put two and two together, weather and broadcasting, and ended up at Penn State with getting my master's degree. And Dr. Greg Forbes was my advisor at Penn State, well known for his severe weather at the Weather Channel. And, he's probably the foremost tornado expert now on the planet. And he's studying under Fujita. Of course, we know the Fujita scale. And then I ended up at the Weather Channel. Well, I did some local TV in Greenville, South Carolina. Can't believe they still have some power out. Nothing like that ever happened when I was there. And ended up at the Weather Channel in 1992 and was there until late April. And then they restructured and let go a bunch of people. And so I was let go. And luckily, Fox Weather came my way, and I'm really enjoying my second career. I'm freelancing. I was full-time at the Weather Channel, and I was on call for many, many years. So this is a little bit less stress, a little less heavy lifting. I'm 68 years old, and so now I am on call in a way, but I'm not, it's not every day. I'm not going to go out and cover certain things that are not major weather events. But so far, I've had 3 hurricanes, 3 eye walls, and 3 eyes. And then we had the PTC number 8 in North Carolina, where we had 15 inches of rain in 3 hours. I've never seen it rain that hard for that extended period of time. So this is my 5th weather story I've covered, and they've all been top of the line. Debbie, Francine, Helene, PTC 8, and now Milton, and we're right on the beach here in Pinellas County. It'll be interesting to see if the surge is higher here Wednesday night, Thursday morning than it was Thursday a week ago. They have put out a mandatory evacuation for the county for A, B, and C zones. And last week, I believe they only did A, or 2 weeks ago. So they're a little bit more concerned this time with the surge here. And I don't know if you're watching today, they're still trying to get the debris off the streets. There's big piles of debris up and down Gulf Boulevard. I mean, as far as the eye can see, probably from, down in Manatee County, Siesta Key, those areas, Sarasota County, and then all the way up to Clearwater. And dump trucks are going up and down Gulf Boulevard today with police escorts. And they want to get the debris out of here because we got another surge coming in. We've got stronger winds by far. Even with a weakening forecast before landfall, they were going to have stronger wind gusts than they had with Helene, and they don't want the stuff flying around and floating around again. And they already had to, bulldoze all the sand off the highways. And when I was in the parking lot today, it looked more like a parking lot in Buffalo after a big lake effect snowstorm. Just incredible amounts of that quartz white sand. So we're anxiously awaiting to see what happens. And of course, it's going to be another one that comes in after dark. We were hoping for a daytime landfall. Had one 2 years ago with Ian down at Fort Myers Beach Causeway, but this time I saw the 5 o'clock data point at landfall is like 1 a.m. Eastern or 2 a.m. Eastern on Thursday morning. So it's going to be another night landfall. Unfortunately, I think it doesn't change the impact, but I think it's just better in the daytime from a safety perspective.
Mm-hmm. So Mike, I know Jen wants to ask you about Dr. Greg Forbes, who's one of our favorite people. So Jen, take it away and ask that. And I want to circle back around to PTC8 and talk and get Mike's impressions, and then Ethan's also.
Yeah. So, Mike, I want to talk about Greg. And for those who were listening to the pre-show, Mike and I worked together at the Weather Channel.
Yes.
And I know that you learned everything about broadcasting from me.
I did.
You learned nothing. We're in completely different areas.
I did. I used to listen to your radio forecasts all the time. In fact, it was the cure for insomnia. I found. No, I'm
yes,
kidding.
My dulcet tones.
No, you sounded great on the radio. How many years ago did you leave the Weather Channel? Gosh, I lose track. Has it been 10 years?
It was 20, when was it? 2012. Yeah, 2012
12 years ago.
Yeah,
wow.
It was not necessarily my choice, but that's okay. I'm happier now.
It wasn't my choice either. So
that's right. So we were in that camp together, but we're also in a camp because I had Dr. Forbes for a professor for 2 classes. One of them was a survey class at Penn State, and then just talk about him. And he is a neat man, and he's so smart.
Yes.
And
did you have severe weather with him? One of the severe weather classes?
I think I did, and then I was just fascinated with the damage survey class. I mean, it was awesome.
I'm a little bit older than you. We didn't have that then. We had, he taught 431, which was the number for years. That was severe weather and severe weather forecasting, and that was his bread and butter, and just incredible. He was my thesis advisor. The man would come in at like 9 in the morning. His office was just catty corner down the hall in the 6th floor Walker building. That's the building at Penn State where the meteorology department has been since, the late 70s. And he would go out to Roy Rogers and get a burger or something, and he'd be back in his office at night and stay there till like 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And his office was filled with reams of data. And then he had a garage full at home at State College. And he's told me about, when he moved to Atlanta to work for the Weather Channel in 2000, how he had to go through all that paper. Because back then it was, it was all hard copy. There were no little thumb drives back in the 80s and 90s. But yeah, he's probably one of the smartest meteorologist I've ever known personally.
Yeah, and I think bringing him on at the Weather Channel was so great to get his expertise as a severe weather expert, and I got a chance to see him back on the 50th anniversary of the super outbreak. I actually did a talk in Louisville, and he talked at the same time, and it was just awesome. I'm like, Dr. Forbes, can I do a selfie? I'm like, I mean, I know him, but I just like, and he's like, he kept saying, hey, it's me, Greg. And I'm like, no, it's Dr. Forbes. I mean, he's just amazing. But I think bringing him expertise.
I don't think I've ever called him Greg in my life. It's been
No.
Dr. Forbes, and I've known him 44 years, and now he's enjoying retirement. I see on Facebook he takes walks every day and brings back pictures of snakes and butterflies and insects, and on his daily walk through the hills and woods and along the creek there where he lives here in Metro Atlanta. So he's enjoying retirement. I'm glad he retired, because the man just worked. It was, if there was even the slim chance of a tornado, he would come into work. And, in the spring, that's like every day. He must have worked 30, 40 days in a row some years. And, it wears you out. So I'm glad he's finally taking a break. And, it's like getting up and deciding what you want to do today. But he is a world-class gentleman, and also as far as a scholar. And like I said, I think the probably preeminent tornado person alive on the planet today.
Mike, you mentioned PTC 8, and somehow it sort of snuck up on me that, it was a 1,000-year event. And then, we follow with Helene. Talk about covering it and what it was like for you. You mentioned it was some of the heaviest rain that you ever saw. And Ethan, I'm coming to you next to talk about the specific, challenges with that. And then, of course, we want to get into Helene a lot more extensively. But Mike, you take it away.
I started out covering PTC 8 at Wrightsville Beach. We had another crew down at Carolina Beach, which is to the south. And we were just wondering what was, at the beginning, what was going to happen. Are we going to get a named storm or not? Because the center actually was off South Carolina. And we headed north. Obviously, you get more of a gradient because the high is to the north. And it wasn't a very deep low, obviously. But we got into Wrightsville Beach, and we were gusting like 40, 50 miles an hour in some of those rain bands. That morning, before I went to Carolina Beach, we had a line come in, and we had lightning bolts coming down all around us. I mean, we had to run for cover. We were set up under the Johnny Mercer's Pier, which is concrete. They built that in '96. Now, after Fran and destroyed it, so they went with the concrete pier. So we were keeping dry, but then the bolts were just coming down, and the wind was blowing down the coast, howling, and we are getting sandblasted, and the rain just pelted us. Then I'm looking at the radar, and it was like it was just basically thunderstorms training, but well away from the center of PTC 8, which was never really got organized. So we drove down there. It was about 30 or 40 minutes, and it just, we've seen rainfall rates of 2 or 3 inches an hour. Maybe it lasts for 20 minutes, and then you do the mathematics to get 3 inches an hour. But this was 3 hours straight, 15 plus inches. And the main issue they had there was Carolina Beach Lake, which is a man-made lake. It's 11 acres just off the shoreline of the Atlantic Ocean. I was told they didn't drain it. They drained it for Debbie. They did not drain it for PTC 8. Maybe it goes back to, hey, it didn't get a name. They're not paying attention, whatever. PTC 8, how could it drop, up to 20 inches of rain? So they didn't drain the lake. When I got there, the lake had overflowed and was flooding the town. The water that was freshwater flooding from just the rainfall was draining away, but the water from the lake was flowing through town. And in the water were these giant, giant mullet They're a freshwater fish and they live in the lake. So they got forced over the lake, and they were swimming through town, and then they went into the harbor. And then, of course, unfortunately, they pass away because they're freshwater fish. But the locals said they had never seen anything like that. From the rainfall perspective, from the lake overflowing, and part of that is the fact that they didn't drain the lake, but that kind of rainfall event is going to cause problems anywhere. Had they drained the lake, it wouldn't have been nearly the impact that we saw. It was all coming from the lake and then came right down to the harbor and then into the harbor. But you got outside of that basin, the water, once it stopped raining, the water just drained away naturally.
So, Ethan, talk about the challenges of covering that and
So
how the story unfolded from your perspective.
PTC8 was challenging, I'll say that. We had a lot of people, as James always has said for a long time, people just focus on the cone and nothing else. So the cone, of course, was going where the center was going, which is into South Carolina. And for my falling, it's North Carolina. And I had 5,000 people say that, oh, we're not getting anything. The cone's not here. So therefore, nothing's going to happen. So that's always fun. But Brunswick and New Hanover County, I woke up about 4 that morning and there was the convective band right off the coast and lined up for like the Wilmington area, the Southport area, if you're familiar with that area. And it just looked bad at like 4 in the morning. So I posted a pretty dire post and was like, please like take caution here in Brunswick, New Hanover County. Flooding is definitely likely. And unfortunately, I don't think too many people really thought it was going to be that bad because it wasn't named. And for some reason, if it's not named, no one seems to care. And I was looking at I have a weather station on Bald Head Island, which is south of Carolina Beach. And at one point, it was 4.5 inches an hour for a while. I think the cup I was watching on my camera because I could see the station, and I'm pretty sure the rain gauge was just overflowing onto the deck. So I don't even know if it was getting the correct rainfall rate. But I ended up with 22 inches of rain. Um, so the whole island was pretty much flooded. All of Southport was flooded. There's still many roads that are washed out. I was actually just looking through some reports from down there, and there's several main roads that are still not fixed. And at one point, 17 was closed in both directions, um, major thoroughfare. And I think it was very challenging to come up with a good way to communicate with how bad the flooding was going to be in such a quick, rapid pace because even most forecast models only had about 10 inches of rain. And we'd already had Debbie a few weeks before, so we already had saturated grounds. So it was just a recipe for just absolute everything flooding. And I want to say it was a very localized impact area of Helene, but some of the damage is similar to Helene, just in a lot less, widespread. But there's washed out roads all throughout Brunswick County still, and there'll still be recovery. Thankfully, where a lot of it hit, not as many businesses and stuff were flooded because it was more rural areas. Seeing the flooding, like just like marshlands and stuff. So mainly it was a big road problem. And then Bald Head had some serious flooding. I was on the went down there 3 or 4 days later, and entire roads were still completely underwater, and many roads weren't even passable. So.
So transition, Ethan, to Helene and talk about the forecasts leading up to it and the response. Of course, we want to learn from the experiences that people had and how our messaging can change in the future to better reach people. So take us there, and I want Kim to really jump in here and Dr. Jacobs and everybody, and get Mike's opinions too, about this disaster, this humanitarian crisis. And I'm drawn back to the old events like Agnes and Camille and the legendary type events. But take it away, Ethan, and get us into that conversation.
Yeah, so Helene was something I've never seen. I'm obviously not that old, so I haven't experienced it. The stuff y'all have experienced, but even with my research of old storms and stuff, at least in North Carolina, I thought it was going to be bad, and I knew it was going to be bad, and I was trying to figure out. The Weather Service in Greenville, Spartanburg did a phenomenal job messaging this. They did a great job. I just wish more people would have at least listened to them, or at least listened to someone. Um, it Leading up to it, we had the pre-event, we had lots of rain. The frontal boundary just squeezing rain out. I think Asheville ended up with 10 inches the day before, maybe in that area. Not exactly Asheville, but we had several 5 to 10 inches of rain. Let's just say across the mountains was a good bet on Thursday, and then Friday it just I woke up at around 2 a.m. So I wouldn't even say I actually slept, but I woke up and started looking at stuff, and it was just it just looked bad and it continued to go downhill. And I think the real question you have to ask yourself is maybe for future messaging, should there have been some more evacuations? I don't want to place blame on anyone, but there wasn't really any evacuations planned, even around even the known areas that were pretty much historic flooding expected with the Weather Service was predicting that. I convinced people on my page to leave. Thankfully, some people left. But I think and then you have the tropical system, and then you had 70 to 80 mile an hour winds. You didn't, I think Mount Mitchell gusted almost 100 miles an hour, which obviously Mount Mitchell is very high, so that's skewed. But you had 50 to 60 mile an hour winds down in the valleys, and that's just widespread tree damage. And I saw pictures that looked like every tree in like certain areas was just shredded off. It was bad. Devastation, and it's going to take a long time. Some of these towns are completely wiped out, and then you have the question: will some of these towns even be able to come back? I don't know. It's hard.
Ethan, you were talking about evacuation, and that was what I was interested in, because there probably were opportunities, especially around the campgrounds and places that were more vulnerable. You mentioned that same thing. What do you wonder might have happened if we had done it a little differently? How do you think those evacuations might have worked?
I mean, I feel like some of those, especially in like Buncombe and Buncombe County, that areas, especially the low line. I think low line areas, an evacuation probably would have been obviously a lot better. Now, would people have actually listened to the evacuation? I don't know. Um, a lot of people told me they didn't think it was anyway it was going to be this bad. I was told multiple times I was overhyping the situation, and when I shared the Weather Service's historic proportion flooding, everyone commented how there's no way. So I don't know if people are just fatigued or don't really care. I think personally, maybe we should have had some evacuations. That's a discussion down the road of what to do differently. I'm sure a lot of people just didn't know how to handle it. And it's such a widespread area. If you do evacuations, where are you sending these people? Because obviously, if you evacuated to a shelter in Asheville, then they don't even have infrastructure. So you'd have all these people evacuated in a shelter. Would that have been worse? And then I don't know. But I do think there should have been probably some sort of evacuation. But
Dr. Jacobs, there was a bullseye there in upstate South Carolina, Western North Carolina, Eastern Tennessee, that while it was not quite as, off the chart or biblical as Hurricane Harvey, 15 to 20 inches in these inland areas is a tremendous disaster waiting to happen. Weigh in on that. I mean, here's the WPC giving the information to us. Here's the Weather Service. I know in Greenville Spartanburg, I don't know about all the other offices, but they mentioned all the things Ethan said: historic, life-threatening, words that got your attention. It reminded me of the Robert Ricks messages from Hurricane Katrina. Neil, talk about that for a second. Then I want to get Mike's, input on, what happened there. He was still recovering in the Florida Big Bend area as all this was unfolding, but he was watching this from afar. So Neil, take it away.
Yeah. I mean, from a numerical weather model perspective, the QPF was pretty good. Because this is this event was an extreme outlier. And a lot of times those are the events you don't really expect the models to handle very well because they're usually corrected towards the mean. So considering that, I think the models did fantastic. There's, Kim could speak to this better than anybody. Part of it was a messaging issue, and part of it is it could just be what people hear. I mean, I've spent an insane amount of time in those mountains, and I can tell you on any day you may have a thunderstorm drop an inch or two of rain, and you literally walk 300 yards over the ridgeline and the sun's out on the other side. And the topography there is so abrupt that if you're running like a 500-meter resolution model, let alone a 3-kilometer model, you're not going to be able to resolve exactly how the storms are going to interact with the terrain. And so it makes the hydrology models, it's hard to initialize them, because if you think about these models that forecast like stream flow, they're initialized on what the atmospheric models produce as far as rain. And if the atmospheric models aren't producing the right rain in the right valley, it could flow down the wrong side of the mountain and go in a completely different stream. And so I don't think we're there yet. I think the hydrological models are actually outpacing the atmospheric models as far as the resolution. I mean, we've got, digital elevation information on the order of centimeters, but if you initialize it with a grid from an atmospheric model that's 3 kilometers across, you could fit multiple different ranges and valleys inside of that. And that poses a real challenge, because if all the floods water goes down one ravine and creeks into one sort of watershed versus another, it's a completely different outcome. The other problem was, I think this, we'll find out more when we start digging into it. But a lot of people tried to evacuate and couldn't, because trees fell across the roads, and that was before a lot of the rain and the flooding started, and so they were stuck. So it wasn't that they didn't get the information. It wasn't that they didn't attempt to act properly, but when trees start falling and blocking roads before the flooding happens, there's a lot of roads, there's only one way out, and a lot of those roads aren't even paved. And it's not like people are just driving around with chainsaws and a bunch of gas cans. And I think that a lot of people got stuck and turned around and went back to their house because they didn't have a choice.
Kim, you jump right in, and then I want to get Mike's opinion too. But you've got some very important messages here.
No, I mean, Neil has nailed a lot of my reservations about the evacuation concept, and I think we need to reckon with a couple things. One was, before the rain had caused all that flooding, like Neil was talking about, a lot of the infrastructure was gone. So what we are talking about is an evacuation that would have had to happen at a time scale that is much farther ahead than the wind impacts hitting all those trees. We were just talking about how we have saturated soils in Florida. We're going to have wind impacts in central Florida. And if people are going to be getting out, doing anything, they have to do it right now, like right now. And that's even a limited area in comparison to the area that we're talking about that would have been potentially flooded. Remember, there was still spatial uncertainty at the time. So even if there was one run of a mesoscale model that indicated like the right area at one point in time, in hindsight, sure, we can look at that and say that was great. But in forecast world, we're looking at that and thinking, well, there's going to have to be some confidence bounds around that, because we know there's uncertainty endemic to this system, to this forecast, for just the placement. Add to that, like having to go back that far ahead and have that level of spatial imprecision. Talking about who needs to evacuate is so hard because of everything that Neil was talking about. Think about this. The mountains literally melted. So anything that we have in the hydro models for where water is going to go, all of the things that are like planned, that are not planned, but all the things that are mapped out, floodways, everything that we know that is a waterway, all the floodplains, everything literally shifts and changes because the ground is shifting and changing. And I mean, just like Neil said, that then meant that there were places where people didn't think that they'd never had water come their way down the mountain slope. Suddenly there was a mudslide. I mean, we are living in, I hate to say it, we're living in some kind of fantasy that we're God in this scenario where we think that we can do this, that we can actually do this in the current state of knowledge. And I think it's hurtful to our hearts to give ourselves the guilt that we should have done that. I think that this event was so far outside of the realm of what we have experienced before that we have got to give ourselves some grace. We've got to give those people some grace. By the time that it was evident what exactly was going on, it was undeniably too late to execute any kind of evacuation. People were very frightfully on their own trying to navigate that and figure it out. And it was a horrible, horrible catastrophe. And it's okay for us to sit with that. It's okay for us to sit with that. And it's okay for us to wrestle with how hard this problem is. And I think it's very worthy for us to think about in the future, could we institute different kinds of solutions for this? Maybe work toward a future where we could consider something like an evacuation paradigm. A couple things I do want to underscore from the reports that did start to come out this past week in major news outlets like the New York Times, the Washington Post, places where they actually started to get some penetration, and were capable of reporting in any sort of reliable way from this area. We started to hear a couple things. I forgive me for my lack of deep geographical knowledge of Western North Carolina, but there was one county that the day before had voluntary evacuation orders. And the day of, it became an evacuation order. And there were emergency managers in the low-lying, the low country, who had staff who were going door to door, knocking on people's doors, telling them to leave. And so I think we can't underestimate the power of, like, warnings have a social component. There's a technology piece, and then there's the what people do for each other in amplifying the risk message, the social amplification of risk piece. And I think that was there. I actually think that was there probably more than we appreciate that it was. And part of one of the news articles keyed in on, there was a county that had actually made a large purchase of outdoor warning sirens that they hadn't had the opportunity to install yet, but they got them because of either last year or the year before Hurricane Fred, or it's a 4-letter hurricane. But there was a hurricane that had affected a similar region with flooding, flash flooding, and people learned from that. It was an extreme event. And they decided, we're going to do something to mitigate against this, and have an alert system so that we can get people up, so that we actually have some response capability. And they were in this mode of, okay, tropical systems can mean we get extraordinary rainfall. I think there were measures of adaptation that were starting to happen. There was infrastructure that was starting to get put into place. There were signs that there was a responsive government. North Carolina, the state government was doing, these press calls, like there was stuff going out in media. And where the failures are in an extremely human and personal place where it is so hard to imagine the unimaginable. But I'll tell you what, after this, they will absolutely imagine the unimaginable. And it's my hope that going forward, maybe evacuation can be part of something we consider. Another aspect that we can consider is just how this place is rebuilt. And if there's something our community can do, I think it is to try to advocate as hard as we can for that community to be able to adopt more mudslide resistant construction practices. And I know that it sounds weird to say this, but there are countries like Bangladesh where they face these hazards a lot, and they would see loss of life in the tens of thousands. Any given tropical system up against a mountain slope would just be devastating. And what they've seen go on with a change in their construction practices and having a little bit better early alerting systems and heavy precipitation detection systems is they've reduced the fatality rate by an order of magnitude on average in a given event. That's huge. If they can do it there, we can do it here. And I appreciate that we like to center ourselves in the weather community as, the forecast is going to be what's there to save you. It might be okay for some instances like this for things to be so extreme, where what we really need to demand, what we really need to hope for, what we really need to advocate for and work for is for the infrastructure to be there so that people can survive even if they are there, because the forecast might not be able to get them out. And it's okay. It's okay for us to work on both. But this conversation has been so interesting to me because in part I see like so much burden that meteorologists were putting on ourselves, but also I see the burden that we're sort of assuming we can put on these individuals to actually execute an evacuation plan. Inland flooding over a huge area is so different from trying to evacuate from Tampa. Look at what's going on in Tampa. Take a look at that traffic. displace that over the roads of the mountains of North Carolina with people going who knows where. I have absolutely like earlier it was I think the phrase that was used was we that we get people out, we move them or something like that. We don't move anyone. They have to move themselves. They have to do it all by themselves and find some other place to go. And how clear was it where it would be safe? That's like hindsight is so 2020. So with that, sorry, Mike, to preempt you, but Neil raised a whole bunch of things that uh, poked this bear. So I hope it is great fodder for the conversation.
So, Mike, why don't you respond? And then,
I-
Ethan, you've become quite a celebrity, and when I see you in Southern Living, Ethan, you're going to be on my coffee table. You got my attention. So I want to hear your response to what Kim had to say too. But Mike, you go.
I wasn't in North Carolina, obviously. I was down in Perry in the Big Bend of Florida. So I got the Helene hit first, and we had a tremendous surge. A meteorologist went into Keaton Beach, where I was the day before, and said he thought it was about 19 feet. There were houses down there up 20 feet. I don't know. I haven't seen anything official. I haven't really dug deeper. I don't know if the Weather Service out of Tallahassee has put anything out as far as the surge, but it was certainly way up there based on what I'm hearing, what we saw as far as damage in Keaton Beach. We're about 20 miles inland in Perry, which is 46 feet above sea level. Interestingly enough, at the Perry Airport was Dr. Josh Werman and his associate Karen, Dr. Karen, I forgot her last name, with the yes, with Dow Kursiba, that's right. And they were there with the Doppler on wheels. Texas Tech was there, and they were trying to catch the eye, which they did. And I think their mast anemometer got a gust of 106. The airport in Perry gusted to 99. And once again, I've used this rule for many years. If the Hurricane Center says a hurricane's going to make landfall with maximum sustained winds of 100 miles an hour, we'll see a measured gust to 100 miles an hour. And that comes true. That has worked. That has worked consistently for me. And I'm not trying to throw the Weather Service under the bus, but you see these hurricanes that come in with triple-digit maximum sustained winds. It's hard to find a sustained wind that high. And in this case, Helene made landfall with winds of 140. And the highest gust I've seen was the Perry at 99. We had a couple of other 90s around Valdosta, gust to 82. But and we're talking about, and I know there are not weather stations. The density is very, very thin down there. But my point is there was a lot of wind. And when I drove from Perry the next day to Tallahassee on 98, which is the main road through the Big Bend, there were a lot of trees down, power poles snapped, and the road was open, but they had come through with chainsaws. And the power was out there for about 4 or 5 days. In Debbie, it was out for about less than a week, but with Adalia, it was out for 7 to 9 days. So the issue there was purely trees and power. There are some trees on homes, but there wasn't enough wind to cause any significant structural damage. The Marathon gas station across the street, of course, lost its awning, but when you drove around the next morning, there wasn't much to see except trees down. And then, and I was on the air warning, even though it wasn't really my area. I was trying when I was on the national, because I'm on a national network, I was mentioning quite a bit about North Carolina and how bad it was going to be. And when I saw someone on a Twitter post, I know Twitter's a dumpster fire, basically. But when I saw someone on a Twitter post said something about being a surprise in North Carolina, I didn't say anything, but the people just lambasted this person. What do you mean a surprise? I mean, the Weather Service, every weather organization used the destructive, catastrophic, historic. The thing is we've heard earlier, as Kim said, from a social science standpoint, people here it's going to be the worst ever, Mike. Are they going to, but until they experience it. I was covering Ian, and we were in the hotel at the resort there, the Marriott, and it was a huge building. So we stayed there, and it was a Cat 4 when it made landfall. We were in the eye wall for 5 hours, and it just roared. It sounded like a hornet's nest. And next day, I went around Fort Myers Beach, not the actual beach, but there's an area across the causeway on the mainland they call Fort Myers Beach. And I talked to some people, and I said, "Why didn't you evacuate?" And they said, "Because Charlie came through as a Cat 4, and the water only got up to the front step." This was a Cat 4, and they had probably about 4.5 feet of water in their home, 4.5 to 5 feet. So it goes to show you, they hear Cat 4, okay. I was in that Cat 4 20 years ago, and we don't have to evacuate. Every animal, every Cat 4 is different. Every Cat 2 is different. There's all kinds of factors. Does it come in at a, perpendicular angle, like the concern with Milton? But what can you do? I mean, you can only, I don't think I think the message was out there, and the Weather Service and everybody else short of, you can't really come on and say the town's going to be flattened and wiped away. I don't think you can really say that,
But you need to make a personal decision for you and your family,
or
Ethan, and that's all.
or
I saw some of our listeners, that did that in the North Carolina mountains. But Mike, they were more weather aware.
or like the famous line from Jaws when the mayor says we're not closing the beaches, and Richard Dreyfuss turns around and says they're all going to die, because he made the point as strong as he could. We need to close the beaches. Some people don't want to listen, but you can't blame the messenger in this case. I think the message got out there. Just, it's one of those situations where, sheesh.
Yeah. Now,
That's my
Ethan,
2
you're
cents worth.
you're in a cool position now because you're a young meteorologist thrust into the midst of all this. You heard what Dr. Cloco McLean said. Comment on that. Expand on it from your standpoint, and let us hear your input.
I think she has very good points. I think there was some evacuations, mainly in the rural areas and campgrounds. I think there could have been a little more, especially on Wednesday and Thursday, or at least Thursday, before. I know a lot of people didn't know if the pre-event would actually happen or how bad the pre-event would be, because that was really what was going to decide. If we didn't have as much rain on Thursday in the mountains, we probably wouldn't have had nearly the amount of problems on Friday. But because we had so much rain, and the mountains actually were in a drought. Believe it or not, there was drought conditions in the western part of the state. We were in rain deficit, so I could only imagine if we had Debbie came further west or any other hurricane, if we had any more rain in the mountains, what even else could have happened. But I think it's very hard you couldn't call an evacuation on Friday morning. The winds were already 60 miles an hour, and as she said, trees were down in those roads. I spent a lot of time in the North Carolina mountains. It is not easy to leave on a normal day, let alone in those conditions. But I really think you have to figure out, what does the public think about catastrophic? You can say catastrophic as much as you want, but what do they believe catastrophic impacts will cause, and how do you message that? Because as Mike brought up a great point, no one's going to really go on TV and say your entire town's getting wiped out, because that's just hard to say anyway, and you don't know for a fact that's going to happen. But I think for the mountains, these people, we're still at 122,000 customers without power as of right now. I think any storm, these people are going to take it seriously. Just from what I've followed, any mention of Milton, people have been asking, is it going to come to the mountains? Because I'm leaving. And so unfortunately, of what I've learned, if people get hit once, they usually learn their lesson. Even not trying to say they learned their lesson, because a lot of people weren't supposed to leave anyway, but they learn how strong Mother Nature actually can be. So.
That's right. Now, Mike, we've got a couple of special guests that have kind of jumped in here tonight to say hello to you. Charles Peak, who set this up, we're grateful to him. Charles, good to see you. And you just got through having dinner with Jim. So, Jim, Charles, take it away. say hello to Mike, and then we want to hear your opinions on Helene.
Hey, Mike, how you doing, buddy?
Good.
Surprise. How you doing there, Michael?
Doing good, Jim. I got to pass along a story. A couple of years ago,
That'd be good.
I was covering a storm in South Bend. We had thunder snow. And Paul Goodlow asked me from the studio, which is a good question. I've been asked this before. What's the most dangerous thing you deal with in the field? Is it hurricanes, tornadoes? And I told him lightning. I mean, because, Jim will say,
Right.
sometimes you're out there
Always.
and the first bolt comes down, it's not, and boom, you're, running for cover. And then Goodlow did, asked me a follow-up, and he said, what's the second thing,
Oh, boy, here we go.
second scariest thing on the road? And I said, being stuck with the Cantori dinner check. Thank you very much.
Right. That's right. It's funny. It's funny you mentioned that, Mike. He wouldn't let me buy him dinner tonight. Tried to buy the group dinner, and he wouldn't let me put him on the list. So
Yeah, I had to. He offered, and he's gracious, but we got to do it the way the accountants want it done.
Well, just
but Mike's right. I can't deny that.
Let Charles pay at Olive Garden, and Jim, you take it at the fancy places.
I was thinking more like
You're the
a
best,
Happy
man.
Meal at McDonald's, but
Yeah, that's exactly right. We've been talking about the humanitarian disaster that is Helene. Love to hear, Jim, your opinion. Charles, your thoughts too. Jim, take it away for a second.
I mean, honestly, it hurts me not to have been there. I want to go up there. I want to let everybody know that we're there and that we care. I mean, if it was up to me, I would have been doing weather coverage around the clock regarding this disaster. And it would have been tough to leave, honestly, to come down here because you would have been so involved in that story. But, our job is to prepare everybody for the next one. And I just can't believe that the possibility exists of two storms in a row that get retired. But that's what we're doing.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
I mean, that's the reality of the situation.
It's just terrifying what we're watching today and tonight. Charles, anything to add to that?
Well, I was talking to a few of my friends with Samaritan's Purse. They're based in North Carolina, and talking to a few of them tonight. They're still on the ground, just helping. And believe it or not, they had two different teams down here in Florida. One, down here in the Tampa Bay area, and one in Perry. And so they pulled them out back into southern Georgia in preparation for this storm, and just the devastation that they were talking about seeing it and just how bad it is. And unfortunately, I was scheduled to go up there Saturday, but then I got sick and unfortunately had to go home and recuperate. And now down.
Oh, you're sick?
Yeah.
Really? I'm sitting next to you.
No, I'm over it. But I was with him. I told him, I said, it didn't matter. It was just him. I needed to get the COVID test before I went back to the studio, and everything. But I didn't have COVID. It was just, but, it happens. And like Jim said, my heart just broke that I couldn't be up there helping tell the stories. I'll never get over the kind of the destruction that these storms can bring. And
you know what I think is one of the hardest things for us as broadcasters and presenters out there is to know the potential and actually vision it and see it. And this is yet another storm that it's like, oh my gosh, this is something that we may have never seen before in terms of storm surge and catastrophic damage. So to kind of know that and then just be like, all right, we got to focus. We got to prepare everybody, make sure they're out of harm's way, make sure they do the evacuation. I can't tell you how many people have sent me tweets or Instagram messages today. Hey, you know what am I going to do? My parents won't evacuate. My friends won't evacuate. And it's just like, my goodness, I'm the only thing you have to get them to evacuate. This is not like any other storm that we've ever dealt with here. We've already had a record-setting storm surge with Helene, and we could top that. If the perfect track for Tampa could double what we just had. So these are unthinkable, numbers in terms of storm surge and certainly potential loss of life. So it's just so hard to know the potential and step back and convey the best message that we can to get people out of harm's way. It's hard.
Well, I remember, Jim, we were in Tallahassee, with Helene, and we were talking about that our concern was the greatest death toll was going to be in the Carolinas. And you knew that was even bigger than Florida and the potential. And unfortunately, it came to fruition. But like you say, you even fear that that's what's going to happen. But how do you convey that to the people enough that they take the appropriate actions?
Yeah, as Dr. Neil Jacobs was saying earlier, there's just no upside to staying. Get out while you can.
And this is one of these things where, the message is always like, you don't have to go so many miles away, but you know what? You may have to, because so many hotels are filled already. Get up into Georgia, get up into Alabama, get up into the Panhandle. Just get out of the way of the track of this thing. Let it do what it's going to do, and then you can get back in. But please, dear God, do not be in this storm surge. I'm telling you, this is where we lose the lives.
I will tell you a positive thing, Bill, as I was driving down this evening before I had dinner with them, from basically Ocala all the way into Tampa, it was bumper to bumper traffic. They're using all the lanes. And so a lot of people are heeding the warnings and going, but there'll be some that think, well, I lived through this one, so I'll be okay with, and every storm is different and every presents its own challenges. And so you can't think that way.
Yeah. Ask Mike. So I've done 115 of these, whether they be depressions, storm wannabes, tropical storms, or hurricanes. I don't know what number he's at right now, but it's up there.
I bet you he knows that
number. But they're all different. I bet he does know that number.
Hey, Mike, how many have you done?
How many, Seta? Where are you at?
Name storms. Anything with a name, I'm on 103. Anything with a name. I don't count. I didn't count them. If I added depressions, I'd be probably 100 and add another 20, 30 more.
Yeah, you would exceed me. You would totally exceed me. Yeah.
But Mike, don't I have an earlier snow angel than you do?
I've done snow angels the first weekend of October in Casper, Wyoming, 2013. I thought I
beat you in Colorado a couple of years ago, getting one in September.
Oh, maybe you did. But look at PTC number 8. It didn't even get a name.
Right.
Maybe that's what, and as I mentioned earlier, you guys were on. Maybe that's why they did not drain Carolina Beach Lake like they did with Debbie, because it didn't have a name, so they didn't drain it. And then most of the flooding in town, the flooding that stuck around for hours, 8, 9 hours or more, was because the lake overflowed. 11-acre lake overflowed. They didn't drain it. And it may be because, it didn't get a name. We don't have to worry about it yet. When it gets a name, we'll drain it. I don't know that.
There's no question to this day, Mike. You're absolutely right. The name makes all the difference in the world, without question.
And at Hurricane Center, I understand the whole reasoning behind PTC, because they can get watches and warnings out early. But I don't think the general public really hashtag PTC8 isn't like hashtag Milton or, in the early stages.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah. So,
but now we've got Milton. Now we've got one of the most historic hurricanes in the Gulf of Mexico. And somebody is going to get absolutely devastated. And it may be a very, very large area here. Again, I'm in Tampa right now. This is where we're starting our coverage. If it shifts to the south, maybe we'll see. But a track to the north of Tampa Bay is something that we've never, ever experienced. And certainly when you go back to 21 or 1848, certainly not even a minuscule part of the population that we have now down here. So this is what I'm worried about. This is what I'm really worried about.
Dr. Neil, jump in. You have
I was looking at some of the spread on the ensemble members, and there's a lot more spread to the south than the north, just because obviously at some point, if they go north, they're going to hit that jet and get blocked and get shunted east. But, growing up in Miami, I always noticed that there's kind of this idea that evacuating to the south is just, doesn't make sense. Like everyone who lives on a peninsula thinks you want to evacuate to the north. But I've been telling some people, not necessarily with this, but if rather than stay there, maybe think about going to Miami. But definitely with like Helene, a lot of people that I knew with Helene were going to evacuate and they were going to continue to stay in the track. And I was like, you would be a lot better off just driving an hour or two south to Miami. And they're like, why would we drive south? We're on a peninsula. It's like mentally they don't want to get stuck, but they would be so much safer than, driving north.
Even going to Miami, though, has its complexities. They're going to get rain. They could flood. So you got to make sure you're in high ground there as well. That's the thing. When you got a storm like this coming across, it's going to have hurricane conditions all the way across the state. You've got to make sure you're in high ground regardless of where you go. If you want to go to, Atlanta got saved from Helene. We got lucky in Atlanta. We should have had the disaster that Augusta had, given the latest track, but we didn't. So, Atlanta's a nice place. It's a nice ride up I-75. You don't have to go that far. Macon, go into Alabama, but this is one I would say go north.
I think it was Rick in the chat mentioned some watches and warnings up pretty far south. One of the things that if you look at the modeling, what happens is when the shear hits this storm and it turns and slows down, the wind field spreads way out. And it'll go from a pretty tight storm to those tropical storm and hurricane force winds are going to spread way out, and that cranks up the fetch. And so, you're going to see.
You've already got Cat 5 surge.
Yeah.
With this thing. So all that does is allow the wind field to take it all in. Right.
Right.
At the end of the day, exactly.
Yeah, and the other thing that worries me about this, and I mentioned Florence earlier because a lot of people, when Florence was making landfall in eastern North Carolina, everyone was saying, "Oh, it's being downgraded from a 4 to a 3 to a 1," and they thought, "Oh, no big deal." But what they weren't watching was it's going to sit in North Carolina for 3 days and dump 3 feet of rain. And that's actually your problem. And I think there's this idea that people, even if they hear, oh, it's not going to be a 5 when it makes landfall, it might get downgraded or something, get out.
But if you got friends or family that have a structure that's built to a 3, okay, as long as it's out of the surge zone. Okay, that's the key. We've got to have people out of the surge. And that's, we see that all the time. And I just think this is going to be a phenomenal surge. And the other thing, there's so much debris. There's so much debris from Helene just sitting around waiting to either float or get windblown. So we're going to have a whole different animal here, guys, with this one.
Hey, Jim and Charles and Neil and anybody else, a 15-foot storm surge in Tampa, 15-foot storm surge. What's that going to do?
I asked Kevin Guthrie today, James, if they've ever evacuated Zone C, and I don't think they have, but they may have to do that with this one. But you're talking about the entire bay. You're talking about all of Pinellas County. So St. Petersburg, there are some spots that are up 20, 30 feet. That people are staying. Okay, that's like Zone D and E, but getting into Zone C, even into Pinellas and Hillsborough County, we could flood. We could have the airport flooded, James. The airport could be in water.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's and this whole thing is terrifying.
You're going to see 5, 6, 8 foot waves on top of that surge too along the coastal areas. So this idea that people think, oh, it's only 15 feet or whatever, and then that's where the height is. Like one of the things I got to give a ton of credit to the Hurricane Center for was they actually went out and painted poles so that people could visualize what the actual height was. Because even if you tell people like 15 feet, they're not really, until you actually look at something that's 15 feet on, like, you don't really think 15 feet's all that much.
Yeah, you don't get that. That's a great idea, and I hope people heed that, because with one thing with storm surge is you don't realize how fast the water comes up. That's, trust me, I was in Katrina. I couldn't believe how fast that water came in. And the other thing is, the waves on top of it, the movement of that water, what's going on underneath, not to mention whatever is in that water. And like in this case, with all of Helene's debris still strewed along the west coast of Florida, all that is just going to be washing around within it. So there will be no rescuing. There will be no getting out when that moves in. And I just want people to realize that.
Charles,
and let me ask you
Jim,
guys
it's good
another
to-
question about.
Go ahead,
Go ahead,
James.
Rick. I'm sorry. Go.
No, I was just going to jump in and say I've been watching a lot of the coverage, and it is going to weaken. It is going to not be a Category 5, I hope, when it makes landfall. It may be a 4 or a 3. I just wish we didn't say the word weaken, because to me that's giving people a reason to say, well, okay, well, it was a 4 last 2 weeks ago, so you know what I mean? I mean, we have to tell people what's going to happen, but
No, that's a great point.
we avoid using any, not to be deceptive or not to tell what's happening, but just to, you can word it in a different way, maybe. I don't know what that is, but I've just been hearing the word weaken so much, and it just makes me cringe with this one, because it's not going to matter.
And you probably cringe today when you listen, if you watch me. Because I'm
not criticizing people for saying
no, I
it.
mean,
That's what's
I did
going
say
to
No,
happen.
I did it too, Rick. You're right.
was good. I said it was going to weaken, but I basically then I did the disclaimer: the winds are forecast not to be as strong. The surge is not going to go away. We're not going to get around this big surge.
Exactly.
But if we can take, and the winds right now are 180. If it comes in at 125, and we knock, 55 miles an hour off the peak winds, save some trees maybe, but I don't think it's not really going to matter as far as the surge. It's not weakening 400 or 500 miles offshore. It's going to be, I mean, it would be nice, but I think it's going to be weakening, and it's going to be too close to cut down on the surge. Plus, the wind field is going to be expanded. So I think there may be more surge issues down in Lee and Collier counties than they had with Helene, Fort Myers, Naples.
Yeah, Mike, great point. Charlotte Harbor, I think it could get absolutely crushed. Punta Gorda, Venice, Everglades, all these areas. Even if it's not raining as heavy, they're going to get that little zinger on the southern side of this thing, which is really going to hammer them. And it's just going to keep pushing that surge that's being created right now as a Cat 5 into the coastline. So don't underestimate this, regardless of the storm strength. You guys are absolutely right. And Rick, that's a great.
Mike, talk about
using
why
the
it's
word
going to be
weakens
different for Punta Gorda here with Milton than it was with Charlie in 2004.
Or Ian. I mean, Jim was
Or
down there with
Ian.
Ian. I was at the Causeway, Fort Myers. Jim was just farther north. Jim, weren't you in Port Charlotte Harbor or near there, right?
No, I was in Punta Gorda.
Punta Gorda,
but we were offshore, Mike. We never got the surge there.
It sucked out, but we never got to come back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because it went so far south, it clipped you, but we got the water pushing out. And that saved us from dealing with the surge. This time, it's unavoidable. It's unavoidable. You're going to get the surge there.
Maybe you'll end up
guys,
there.
give me an analog to Katrina. So Katrina was a 5, landfall of 3, destructive storm surge. Well, what are the similarities with Milton compared to Katrina?
Wow.
I think you actually, James, have to compare it with Helene in terms of the size of the wind field, because it's up there with that. And you saw, record surge in Tampa with a landfall up in Taylor County in Steinhatchee. So now you're talking about something that's building surge coming in from the southwest. All these bays are open. Fort Myers Beach, Charlotte Harbor and Tampa Bay. A storm to the north of Tampa Bay is going to create catastrophic storm surge all the way down the coast, all the way down.
Wow.
Yeah. Hey, Rick, to come back to your point, I know Jim was talking at dinner. We were looking at somebody, that a meteorologist, that had made a tweet and meteorologically said the right things on it weakening, but Jim made the point going, boy, we really have to be careful with our messaging there, that we don't, and so, people want to be scientifically correct, and that's important. But like you say, it's not as easy to try. How do you word it so that we don't let the public hear what they want to hear necessarily?
Exactly.
It's a challenge. Yeah.
Yeah, you want to be scientifically accurate and tell the facts, and that's what we do. But yeah, and that's just another one of the problems, I think, with the Saffir-Simpson scale, just boiling down everything to one number that doesn't really capture what Jim's talking about, this catastrophic surge that's going to be
unlike anything these places have seen before, I think. But yeah, it's hard, and I don't have the answer, but it's just an observation.
It's time to put the storm surge as broadcasters before the cone. Here's the storm surge forecast. This is how much water we're going to have coming in. And if you're not, at a safe place or above this, you could drown. You could lose your life. And then we go into the cone. Then it's going to track, then the category. So storm surge needs to take the lead from a broadcast perspective, in my opinion, in this.
Today, one of my colleagues came in today, and he knew that I was extremely interested in the weather, and I was grateful for this conversation. He pulled me aside and he said, "Bill, I know you know a lot about the weather. My daughter has gotten into these TikTok videos about the HARP and controlling the weather and the hurricanes. And do you think that the government really, did this, is making this hurricane strong to affect the election?" And it just broke my heart. And he's a super, super nice man. So I felt like I could talk to him, honestly. And I said, please, get her to go to some trusted sources. But right now, Dr. Kim Cloko McLean, let's give it a break. We're in the response mode right now. We do not need to be in the disinformation mode.
It's so awful. Like I look at our field and everyone in it, like what these people who are spreading the mis and disinformation don't know is that we are all traumatized. I mean, it is awful. Doing what we're doing right now, watching Milton, we're all sharing in the collective experience of a trauma that's being borne out before our eyes. We know, we have the burden of knowing better than almost anybody on this planet what is about to happen. And it is so awful to know the limits of our power in the face of that. And then to hear people after the disaster come in and say, "But you guys made this. You guys control this. You make it," is a layer of trauma on top of trauma that is hard to put into words. And I tend to be a fairly composed person, but I've lost it this week with the garbage that's gone on. That people think that this is something like the social scientist in me understands. I get it. I get the lenses that people look at things through, and our polarized political lenses are more fine-tuned than they've ever been in probably US history. But it is unacceptable what's happening. And it is awful. The questions that are being raised, I feel awful for all of you who are on the front lines reporting and are probably dealing with the heat of this in a way that I can only barely fathom. And, Ethan, in an active disaster zone, you experienced this. And part of why, we wanted you on the show is you reputedly, had such a hand in saving so many people. People turned to you, listened to you. And I'm sure that at the same time that you're feeling that and how grateful you are that you were able to help people, you're also probably getting a lot of this. What is it like on the ground dealing with the mis and disinformation in North Carolina? And then, Mike and Charles and Jim, what is it like dealing with this in the face of, you're the face of trying to get people through this, and your very credibility is being attacked in this really bizarre way? Ethan, let's start with you from the North Carolina experience.
Well, from the beginning, I've had lots of misinformation sent to me. I've had just recently banned several words on my Facebook page because I was sick and tired of dealing with it. And every post, as James posted today, is covered in disinformation. During the storm, I was just trying to get people's reports. Like, I was going through comments, and half the comments were irrelevant or not even at all related to anything weather, and people were just spewing nonsense. I can go on a rant forever about that. But it's just, there's so much misinformation. I think what's happening, and as meteorologists, it's hard to sit here and how bad it's going to be, and then you're sitting here and people are telling you how we control it and we're the reason behind it, and it's hard. And the reports coming out on Saturday morning were hard because you'd get reports, and one of the posts I posted, multiple people said there's just no way that's true. And I'm like, I'm looking at pictures. I got someone sent me pictures of like dead bodies in a French Broad River. That's hard to look at, not something I would ever repost, but it's hard. And unfortunately that stuff came out, and there's just I don't understand why people can't just listen and understand how bad it can be. And I told people in Florida to leave. I have some friends in Tampa. I convinced them to leave today, and I just don't know.
Any of our correspondents out on the front lines, Mike, anything to add to that?
I haven't dealt with much because I've been working, and everybody's busy trying to clean up and get what they can do done following Helene. And the traffic today was horrible in 275 and over the causeway, and they've shut down the causeway tonight, except to local folks and business owners. And tomorrow night at 7, it's shut down on all these barrier islands. So and they've evacuated A, B, and C. I believe with Helene, in Pinellas County, they only evacuated A, I think. So they're taking it seriously.
Yeah, A and B.
A and B in Pinellas last week, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, and tonight, for
A, B, and C tonight. Yeah.
Here's my thing, guys, on this, and we have to stay a strong team here. All right, let's not spend time nitpicking each other's forecasts. We are all in this together. Okay, we are trying to save lives. That is our mission. We need to stay on mission, and we need to stay strong together. Do not waste your time, your breath, your tweets, your social on picking on someone who may have said something wrong. Correct them offline, but let's stay united as a front, because now we are not only battling Mother Nature, but we're battling all this crap that's coming out that we're creating. So that's my advice to all my colleagues.
Thank you for that, Jim. James Spann, you dealt with a bunch of it. You mentioned last night on our telethon, our Weather Pods telethon, that this has been one of the roughest periods you've ever dealt with. Talk about that.
I've been doing this. I've been doing this 46 years, and I've had more hate pointed at me in the last week than any other time in my whole career. And I'm not even directly involved in this. And it started, my sin was posting a link to a FEMA page about rumor control. And within 5 minutes, I got a message from a guy who said, "Go F yourself and retire now." And then the threats came in. These were threats at me. And I just got one here a second ago. It says, so I'm going to go out on a limb here and say you are being controlled and paid by the very ones that are murdering hundreds and causing thousands to be homeless. I pray that you find Jesus and repent soon, because the wrath of God will be on you. This is the kind of stuff I'm getting, guys. And these people believe this. And there's like a mental health crisis in this country.
Yeah, there you go. You just hit the nail on the head.
That's part of it. Yeah, and some of these people are sick, and they need a doctor, and they need clinical help. They need behavioral science to help, behavioral health clinicians to help them. And I have to be careful not to mock anybody that's mentally ill, but some people are just mean, and some people are delusional. And something has changed here. I don't know what it is, but it's different this time. It is radically different.
Yes, agreed.
I don't know if it's foreign actors with these bots or the TikTok accounts. I don't know, but that's a Kim question. Kim, when this is all over, I want you to figure this out. Something is different. And I don't know what it is, but if anybody can figure it out, it's you.
Well, there are the good news is there are people who study mis and disinformation randomly. I was I represented NOAA in this multi-agency webinar on mis and disinformation in hurricanes a couple months ago. It was hosted by like a defense contractor that specializes in studying this stuff from the social science perspective. And I think it was my own failure of imagination, to be honest, to think about foreign malign actors trying to capitalize on our disasters and combat our messaging. We have so much of our own internal problems that we deal with that was sort of the locus of my conversation. Was it's really hard to do rumor control when you're talking about the future, and there can be a lot of people with legitimate difference of opinion in the forecast and calling that out. But there are experts who study this stuff, and I'm wondering you've hit the nail on the head, Span. Like I've been wondering if a lot of the reason that the vitriol has been so bad is because this is a coordinated campaign. It can be something where those mis and disinformation experts were talking about how like some of it is the foreign malign actors doing stuff, but often their stuff looks lame and is easy to tell like it's just a bot. And sometimes it is them like sort of using useful idiots who have followings and seeding things with them and persuading them. And in this ecosystem of social media, it is all too easy to do all of that. And we might be up against forces that we can barely fathom. And I really do think that is going on in this particular crisis. I would not be at all surprised, because you're right. It is worse than ever.
Yep.
And the very nature of the disinformation, it's so bombastic. It's so bombastic that it's one of those things where you look at it and you're like, it's the perfect fodder for social media firestorm. For anyone who wants to breed engagement, you post something dumb, and then people who want to just rail against it. Like I've seen people who work in weather communications, like as their job, even for the government, like trying to engage with these posts and try to shoot them down, and it all shoots up engagement. And the question is, at what point, like when is it useful to engage? When do you have to hang back? What do you do in the face of these things? We might, after this, need to be part of this broader framework of experts who've been studying mis and disinformation in other contexts, because I think it is at our door. I think it's at our door, and I'm almost afraid of where it's going to go after Milton, because the all of the momentum is with us now for this to be awful. And if there's anything that's going to make a disaster worse, it is clouding any response effort with all of this.
Don't get lost in this, guys. Stay on mission. We all know our mission. We know what we got to do. We're smart. We know how to prepare people. Stay together as a unit, and let the chips fall as they may. But if we stay together and stay on our mission and focus on saving lives, no one can ever fault us for that. Ever, 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 ever.
Amen, Coach. Dale, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
I mean, I was just going to say, Kim's completely right. There is, and I mean, I saw a lot of stuff at NOAA when I was there, and it's every bit as nefarious as you think, and a whole lot worse. It's not just knuckleheads in their parents' basement in this country. It's a global effort, and it's just going to be a reality that we have to live within and operate through. And I'd like to point out, if you look at the Weather Act reauthorization that passed the House, and it'll get reintroduced next year, there's a section on blockchain tracking technology and digital watermarking for authentication of legitimate NOAA products, because all sorts of nonsense is going on.
Wow. Well, this is frightening stuff. Jen Nairmore, give us a positive before we transition. I know our guests have given us so much time tonight, and I know they probably need to get to work because they've got big stuff. Ethan, if you want to stick around, we'd love to ask you a couple more questions maybe after the break about what you're doing. But Mike and Jim and Charles have given us lots of extra time. Jen, give us a positive.
Just a couple of thoughts. I echo what Jim was saying. We've got to come together as a team, and what I wish and I hope and I pray will happen is that people who take the energy to fight and go back and forth and call out or whatever, if they took that energy to actually go serve somebody else, wow, what an amazing thing it would be. And what has been amazing and what we do need to focus in on is the fact that there have been so many people who have served their fellow man and woman in these events. They stopped what they're doing. They've gone and helped. They have dug people out. They have, donated where they've had to say we can't take any more donations. And that's what's amazing. That's who we are. That's what we need to focus in on. And if, as us as meteorologists, and hopefully she doesn't get mad at me for telling this story, but it's very important for me. And I'm sure that everybody knows somebody in the weather enterprise, that just how hard this is on us. We are not making stuff up, and we're not, causing things to happen. So for whatever, all that. My best friend and my coworker, Sally, who lives in Venice, she had to go through Helene and report on it. She reported in Asheville. And our radio stations, as you all know, we have maybe 12 seconds. Sometimes we may actually have 30 seconds to give all the meaningful things that we need to say. And she had to do Asheville. And she used the words catastrophic, and she did the best thing that she could. And I finally got a chance to talk to her after the fact, and she just sobbed. And she told me, she said, I failed. I don't think I did a good enough job. I hope if somebody heard my voice, I hope that they heard me and that they did the right thing. She goes, but I don't know if I did the right thing. And I had to calm her down, and I had to settle her. I'm like, you did everything right. It's like what Kim said earlier. We are not God. She did everything right. And it shows her heart. That is her heart. That is all of our hearts as servants. And that's what we do. That's why we are here. And so take her story, and now she's in Southwest Florida. Now she's going through this, and I'm worried sick about her, and I'm trying to be a calm voice while I'm up here in Ohio trying to help her. And that's who we are, everybody. Let's keep that service focus, and just the fact that we do love people, we want to help, and that's our goals as we go through the next several days and try to do the messaging. We will do everything we can to try to help people.
And let me just echo what Jim said. We are, goodness, at this day and age, we've got to be together. I love what Jim said. We have to be together. We are all on the same team, and we all have this kindred spirit, and we just have to watch each other's back and just keep our eyes focused on the prize, which is mitigating loss of life. That's what everybody here does. That's what we do. And it's so easy to get hung up in some of this nonsense and all this other stuff that's going on right now. And it's mentally, it's fatigue. It drains you mentally is what it does. It's just and we got to put that stuff aside. But Jim and Charles and Mike, I just want to thank you three guys. You guys better get a nap. You got a long day tomorrow, long day Wednesday, long day Thursday. What can we do for you guys? Anything?
I think given this message, James, everybody's point of view is so perfectly put. Guys, we're in this for the good of everyone. And that's never bad. No one can ever fault you for that. So remember that.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're all living the dream. We're living what we were born to do here.
Yes.
And it's an honor to be able to do this. And if we can just get our mindset back on that and try and phase out this noise, it's all going to be good. So Jim and Charles, y'all get a nap. Thank you guys. Y'all are the greatest. Thank you all for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Mike, it's an honor for you to be here, and you get some sleep too. Thank you, Mike.
We'll see you bright and early in the morning at 7 a.m. Eastern.
We'll be watching,
on the beach.
Good to see you, Mike.
Have a good night, and thanks again for having me on. We'll hope and pray the shear kicks in sooner, and its intensity forecast, have not come very far versus the track forecast, and one can only hope. And I'll never say a bad word about the Hurricane Center if this one weakens faster.
Exactly.
All right, Mike. Godspeed and good luck. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You too, James. Don't let the dumpster fire we call Twitter get to you. I had death threats a couple weeks ago. I mean, just vile stuff. I mean, it gets to my wife, and I say, just ignore it. Don't look at it. Just ignore it. But I agree. It gets worse by the day. I'm glad I didn't grow up, and I'm sure you're glad you didn't go to high school and with social media.
Yeah, class of 74, baby. Class of 74.
There you go. Okay. Okay. Good night
All
from the
right.
Deer Peaks.
Good night,
All
Mike.
right.
Good night.
Let's take a quick break. We're going to hear from Tony Rice. We're going to hear from Jen, and we'll come back with picks of the week and much more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
The bracketed meteor shower peaks early this week, and it's worth looking up for. Most meteor showers are at their best during the unfriendly pre-dawn hours, but the constellation Draco the Dragon, where these appear to be originating from, is at its highest in the evening hours, after sunset, making it more convenient, especially during these comfortable fall evenings. But this is a variable meteor shower, which means most years you're only going to see a few per hour. But some, as recently as 2018, there have been outbursts of hundreds. Elsewhere in the sky, Comet C2023A3 Chuchusan Atlas continues to brighten, past magnitude 1, and that's pretty bright. The thing holding us back from seeing it right now is that it's so close to the sun in the sky that the dawn's light is drowning it out. That changes this week, as this morning comet becomes an evening one. By the latter half of the weekend and into next week, it will become visible in the evening sky, beginning about 45 minutes after sunset. More on that next week. You may have also heard about the recently discovered comet C2024 S1 Atlas, and that it could become visible in late October, though claims that it might be brighter than Venus are very premature. It's currently forecasted to brighten to the point just to the limits of the unaided human eyesight, as October turns into November. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
This week in tornado history, on October 11th, 1954, an estimated F3 tornado struck Franklin, Indiana. It first hit west-southwest of town and destroyed a church. 2 homes were damaged as well. At the western edge of Franklin, an auction barn was leveled and there were several injuries. Near Highway 31, at least 30 homes were heavily damaged. The Franklin Evening Star on October 13th, 1954, documented a few stories that had emerged from this event. One involved a local insurance agent, Claire E. Bogard. Quote, Claire was in his parked car in front of the post office when a big tree toppled on the auto, crushing the right side. He miraculously escaped injury. Larry Moran, a member of the fire department, thought his 3 dogs had been killed. Quote, but one by one, they turned up. One was dragged by the twister 100 feet while chained to a doghouse but survived. Another nearly drowned in a hen house but made it out alive. And the 3rd dog came wandering up to the back door hours after the tornado. Tragically, there were 2 fatalities in the Highway 31 area. Mrs. Colleen Williams was standing in her yard when she was struck in the head by a falling tree limb. She was pregnant. Sadly, Mrs. Williams died at the hospital. Her baby girl was delivered 2 weeks prematurely. Her newspaper reports the baby suffered brain injuries resulting from a lack of oxygen between the time of her mother's death and her delivery, and she also passed away. We have a full summary about this event and hundreds more at tornadotalk.com.
All right. Time now to dig into the email box and see if there's anything in there this week.
We do. I actually have 3 emails, and they're all related to Milton, so I thought it would be very important to get through these. First of all, Damon Ferguson wrote this evening, and I don't know much about this, so hopefully somebody can weigh in. With Milton heading for Florida, I wonder if word is sufficiently spreading among Central Florida iPhone 14, 14 Pro owners about free satellite messaging services. I guess that if you update those models to iOS 18, then if the cell towers are taken out, then you get satellite messaging. Does anybody know about that? Ethan, Ethan, are you aware of that?
Yeah, I had a bunch of followers actually end up been able to text me in the mountains, and that's how some of my critical information got out actually, because I posted about how they should update iOS 18. I had some people actually just say, well, can I give you my personal phone number, so then if we lose service I can message with you and you can get the information out. So yes, iOS 18, it works really well. You can text, but you need a 14 plus, I believe, or 14 or higher, iPhone 14 or higher. But some of my followers were able to just text like normal, and they said it worked great.
That is fantastic. No, that's great. And I did not know that.
It has to be iOS 18, so it doesn't work.
Okay.
So
is there any anything out there where we could, have a link or something that shows I never knew this, so I think this is fantastic. Something that we could send out.
Apple's website has some good stuff. You could probably just screenshot Apple's website, or something like that. But it was helpful for some followers. Not many, because not many people have the new phones. But the people that had it, it was able to work. It worked apparently very well. So.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. We also heard from our friend Johnny Parker, who had a couple of stats. I actually had to have him update part of his stats because with the 8 o'clock update, but with Milton now 897 millibars, the lowest Gulf hurricane pressure since Rita at 895 millibars, has had an 80 millibar pressure drop in 21 hours. And since Camille was downgraded, there has not been a 185 or 190 mile per hour hurricane in the Gulf on record. So, Johnny, thank you for sending us statistics like that. This is a historic thing that we're watching unfold. And then we had this come in from Rob Strecker, who saw a post from our friend Aaron Rigsby from Ohio Storm Chasers on the face bag. He specifically said face bag for you, James. He mentioned he mentioned that the hurricane hunters encountered hail, and I saw that too. My question is, how common or uncommon is this in tropical storms and hurricanes? I don't recall ever hearing about hail in these systems before. I'm going to throw that to Neil.
I mean, you can get hail, but it's not like a regular thunderstorm. So there's a couple different reasons why it's not as common. One is there's a tremendous amount of latent heat release, and that really warms the atmosphere. So the freezing level inside these storms is geometrically really high. The other thing is you don't have the updrafts and downdrafts in a hurricane like you do in a well-formed hurricane like you do in a thunderstorm. Believe it or not, the lateral spiral motion is so much stronger than the upward and downward motion that a lot of times you're not necessarily going to get updrafts to elevate hail. And when it's coming down or going up, it's spiraling. So it actually warms and cools at a different rate. And so if you talk to some of these hurricane hunter folks, they'll actually tell you, as far as like just getting beat around in a hurricane hunter flight, it's a lot of the depressions and the storms that aren't really well organized that'll beat you up more than like a category 5, because the wind field in a category 5, even though it's extremely strong, is fairly homogeneous.
That's awesome. Thank you, everybody, for writing your emails, and email at weatherbrains.com. Let us know your show suggestions, your comments about what's happening with the hurricane season, the comments on the show. That'd be great. We appreciate it. Back to you, James Fan.
All right. So before we do picks of the week, Ethan, did you expect all this attention you've received here in the past few days?
Oh, well, I did not, because I've been doing this for a while, 9 years, 8 years, and I've always done the same stuff. Florence, I did the same coverage. I just want to help people and save lives, and I really just tried. It was a different ball game, I think, with this storm, and I just was like, I can't withhold some of this reports I'm getting, so I just started releasing stuff that I was getting. It was hard because with the day of misinformation, I got AI images of flooding that was from California, from a flood event in California, and some person tried to tell me it was from from Spruce Pine, and I was like, well, hate to break it to you, but I grew up in North Carolina, and that does not look like Spruce Pine. So I just tried to get the information out, and as you call it, face bag is, it's something, but it can be useful, and I've learned it still able to utilize it correctly to save lives, and that's what I was trying to do. Get the information out, utilize it, delete all the people's random stuff that's not helpful. But I didn't think I was going to.
So how many followers did you pick up this week?
200,000. For a kid, it started a weather page for my friends and family. I'm sure some are definitely not from North Carolina, but I was thinking about doing a report thing to try to figure out where everyone's from just to see. But I mean, blown away. I'm honored that people literally told me I was saving lives. I don't personally think that. I think the first responders, but obviously we try to do the job to get the information out. But yeah, somehow 200,000 people found me in 4 days.
Well, see, and listen, traditional broadcasters can learn something from you. You're doing it right. You know, you're there when the people need you. You're there. You are there. Your information is fresh. It is relevant. You understand the people. You understand the culture. You understand the geography. You understand the microclimate. You do it right. And so many traditional broadcasters just don't do it right on the social side. They don't get it. What they need to do is study you. And
You have to.
I can only hope that you come to the National Weather Association annual meeting next year. Have they hit you up on this yet?
They haven't.
Well,
Kim Coco
I'm hitting you
McLean
up
is
right now.
lined up
We're about
to
to.
hit you up right now. So get
Yeah,
ready.
Rick, give him a sales pitch.
I'd be
Rick, give him
honored
a
to
sales
come.
pitch.
I was a member. I can rejoin. I forgot to renew, to be honest. But
I'm going to let Kim give him the sales pitch. I mean, this really does feed right into something we're working on for the next NWA annual meeting next year. It'll be in Huntsville. It's the 50th anniversary. We just had a call today about it, and it's super exciting. Trying to bring in people like you and learn from you and learn more about what you do. Kim, is that I was only on one call today. You've been on more than I have, so.
Yeah, so there's an idea to try to expand what we think of from the Weather Service perspective as the IWT, or the Integrated Warning System, Integrated Weather System, the Integrated Weather Team, T. But the idea is you did have such a profound impact on so many people. That's why you're hearing about it. And there are others who take to social media platforms and are having enormous impact too. It's been controversial in our field a little bit to date. Not everybody has had a warm reception as they've taken to these new forms of media, but it's very much, from my perspective as a social scientist in the room, I think it really behooves us to all start to talk and break down some of these walls. And there are people in the Weather Service who are passionate about this. And they're the guiding force organizing some of this. So, hey, Kevin Laws, he's a chief bear poker behind this one. And there are people in emergency management who are part of our team, thinking this through and how we want to approach this. And we're thinking about having a sort of crucial conversation and get to know each other and find ways to move forward together and expand the idea of what the traditional team is, to be more inclusive, because that's the reality that we're in. And like Jim Cantori just said, we are all in this together. You said, Ethan, you've been doing this since you were in 7th grade to save lives, and you care so deeply about people, and there's nothing that's different about your heart than anybody else's heart here on this panel and in our community because of the platform you've chosen. And we could stand to learn so much from you about what you're learning in navigating that space, what your challenges are, and finding ways to mutually support one another, so that we can make sure that the job gets done. So Rick has graciously volunteered to be the moderator for this because he's so wonderful at, as he covers the space, bashful, but he's so good at, taming the waters of things that can be hard conversations. The Oklahoma City market has been an interesting one to try to corral over the years, and Rick has done it. We can find ways to put the egos aside a little bit, for that mission. So all that to say, thank you, Span, for the lead in. Span is also Kevin has trained him to help us get some folks behind this one. So there's an army, and we're excited. There's a lot of people who are excited, and we really hope that you'll find a way to come to NWA so that you can join us.
I would love to. Yeah. So if just give me whatever information you need to know, and I'll get a way to get to Huntsville. So I also want to come meet James in person anyway. So we'll can make it happen.
This is going to be good. That's a firm commitment right there. Kim
I'll
and Rick,
there.
you did a great job. That's outstanding. All right, so we're running long here. We got to get the picks of the week. This is where we go around the horn. Everybody shares something that's cool, a source of data, website, social media, something that's cool. So again, I'll just start with mine. I love watching video from the reconnaissance aircraft going into hurricanes, and today we saw some from Miss Piggy And it's just fascinating to watch the video that they shoot. I have never been on one of these missions, and I would like to do that one day before I die. But the next best thing is watching some of their videos. So my link is to some of the video from a mission into Milton today. So let's just go around the horn here. Jen, I bet you got something good. You always do.
No, I do. Well, it was hard to pick something today, but I did pick something from Brian McNulty, who is amazing to follow. He has awesome radar, and he posted this. It's not every decade that you're able to see explosive intensification to a sub 900 millibar hurricane happen within land-based radar range, and yeah, you're right. And to see that radar loop that he has set up off the Yucatan was just pretty. It was pretty eye-popping. So that's my pick.
Yeah, that's good stuff. I mean, there's such a treasure trove right now. It's hard to ingest all of this, but again, hopefully these picks will help you see some pretty good stuff here. All right, Neil Jacobs, give us something really good, and you always do too. Give it to us. Go.
Well, I've been sort of going too heavy on the science and the code lately, and I wondered if maybe this was too soon to talk about something that wasn't death and destruction related to a landfalling hurricane. But Tim's over there laughing like it's not quite as funny as you think. So my pick of the week is a bunch of footage of people surfing in Alabama with waves that look every bit as fun as what I've seen in Hawaii or Fiji. No joke. This is Alabama getting 3 foot, 4 foot overhead waves, stand up barrels. Happens maybe once a decade, but it happens.
Yeah. Doesn't happen that often. I will say that. Good old Gulf Shores. Hanging 10, man. Hey, dude, let's go surf. All right, that's outstanding. All right, Rick, give us a great pick of the week.
Well, we talk a lot about the cone when we're looking at these hurricane forecasts, and I think we're doing better relaying, and I think we did a good job with Helene relaying some of all the impacts. Well, there's a web page that you can go to that will show you the hurricane threats and impacts graphics. It's relatively new, and it's by county warning area from the WFO. So the link that'll be in the picks of the week will be the Tampa Bay office, since that's the focus right now. But you can substitute any coastal office 3-letter ID in that URL, and that's you can see the storm surge, the heavy rain threat, the tornado threat, and the wind threat, and gives you zoomed in, zoomable graphics that really help you to narrow down your localized impacts of things versus that big national scale NHC map. So that's my pick.
And I did not know that existed. That's a great pick. Somebody just sent me notes says Caitlin Collins on CNN is talking about you and the frustration you are facing on social media due to misinformation. So there you go. All right, Kim, give us a good pick of the
more
week.
disinformation coming your way, James.
Go, Kim.
Well, hey, on that note, I'm going to post a link to that really awesome, not because I was there, but because of all the other experts who were talking about mis and disinformation in that awesome panel discussion, the multi-agency one. Listen for everybody else and not me. And if you want to think about how academics are thinking about, and people working in sort of the national security space are thinking about disinformation and hurricanes before all this happened, take a look. I think you might really enjoy the conversation.
I will look forward to that. That's outstanding. Well, Ethan, we have stalled long enough here, so the floor belongs to you. I know you got something good.
Well, I was gonna do the Hurricane Hunter thing because I've looked at it like multiple times. So you took that one, but I'd always
I stole your pick. That's what I do. That's the reason I go first. I steal other people's picks.
Well, no, it's an awesome video. I've watched it multiple times. Great science. I will say that Coastal Risk Management website, I'm sure people know if that's a good one. I like it for surge stuff. It's done pretty well. It's not a really cool thing to look at for like fun stuff, but it's good for trying to figure out how bad the surge is. And the surf in North Carolina has been great recently. So that's about all I got right now.
All right. That's good. That's good stuff. All right, Bill Murray, go. What you got for us?
Yeah, James Spann, watching the raw data coming out of the hurricane hunters is fascinating. You can go to Dr. Levi Cowan's site and actually pull the raw data files. There are other places to do that, but at the top of all his raw data files, he has a link to the NHC explainers. It's very detailed, very technical, but it's understandable, and it helps you decipher those messages. And I've loved learning to read that information because it's fascinating and historic what we've seen today. I have the guest next week, Sean Potter. Jared Rennie, James, who joined us last night on the Weather Pods telethon, is going to talk to us. Of course, he lived through Helene and Asheville and has a lot of tremendous insights. And he is at NCI, so he's got some NCEI, so he's got some great insight onto impacts of that. And then we're going to gradually transition to somehow James A has taken over the guesting process, and he's got 5 incredible guests lined up between November the 11th for sure, maybe even the 4th. I think that's your guess, James. But the 11th and the 9th, get ready because James A is getting us some great guests during that time, and we really, really appreciate that. But next week, Sean Potter, Jared Rennie after that. I have Tuscaloosa Mayor Walt Maddox on the 28th, James, and I'm going to reach out to him and his assistant one more time and just make sure that works really. And if it does, we'll look forward to talking to him because, of course, he was instrumental in the response to the 2011 tornadoes here in our state.
All right, very good. So let's go back to Ethan one more time. Ethan, give us kind of a summary of your ways people can follow you on the socials and anything else. So this is your chance to plug anything you want to plug. Go.
Well, so I started a weather page in 7th grade. It's just called North Carolina's Weather Authority on Facebook and Instagram. I have a Twitter page, but for my weather page, I don't really use it. I just use my personal Twitter because it has more followers anyway, and it's just Ethan Clark WX. But yeah, that's what I have. I'm just trying to make a difference some way or somehow, and not trying to get anyone
and to all of these national broadcasters, follow this guy and study this guy because he's doing it right. And that is so encouraging to see that because you
have to be so personal.
Yeah. And again, you're there. One of the main things, you're there when they need you. You're engaging, you're responsive, you understand them. And the information is just outstanding. So I can't tell you how many people have sent me a note just, do you know about this page? Yeah, I follow the guy. So, but again, Ethan, thanks for your time. And we do have to wrap this thing up because we're a little late here this week. We made it in almost 2 hours. If you are new here, we are typically on the air every Monday night at 7 o'clock Central, 8 o'clock Eastern on the WeatherBrains YouTube channel, WeatherBrains, youtube.com/WeatherBrains. But we know that most of you listen to the audio podcast. If you want to get in touch with us, the email address, it works, email@weatherbrains.com. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks a lot for watching, for listening. Have a marvelous weekend. God bless. All right. Fun show tonight.
Great show. Thank you, Ethan. So nice to meet you.
Ethan.
So nice to meet you all. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for your time. I know it was a long session here, but thanks. It was good. Thanks, everybody.